Hi. So I met a young homeless guy called Joe about 4 months after opening our first Social Bite store in Edinburgh. He was selling the Big Issue on the corner outside, and I started to get to know Joe. And he shared his story with me, and he's given me permission to share that story with you today. So, Joe was brought up by alcoholic, abusive parents until the age of about 5. He was hit regularly, and he was locked in the cupboard for days at a time. If any of you in here have children in your family, I want you just to imagine for a second what it would be like for a 4-year-old child to be locked in a cupboard for days, alone, cold, hungry, thirsty, crying to no avail, all the while to the sound of drunken parents partying or fighting outside of that cupboard door. Joe was taken away from these parents and separated from his 3 younger siblings, only ever to be reunited with one, his brother Pete. He was placed in care, where rules were imposed as often as they were changed from house to house, and he struggled through several schools where he was always treated as a second-class citizen by teachers and students alike. He was trouble. So when he hit 16, he got the hell out of care, he got the hell out of school, and he was on the streets. He didn't have anybody. He didn't have family or friends like you or I might. He didn't have anyone to get his back, except his brother Pete, who I can tell you firsthand, he's a handful himself. So, when I and my business partner Josh decided to set up Social Bite, we did it hoping that it would be a tool to change people's lives for the better. So with that principle in mind, we offered Joe a job and hopefully a chance at life the fair way. This is Joe. He's the one grasping the Glen's bottle of vodka for dear life. And that's his brother Pete. They look free and happy there, but this is a couple years ago I took this photo. And he wasn't like this when I met him. He was quiet, impatient, moody. You know, that kind of dark cloud that surrounds a person persistently? We had one of those. He was a difficult character. He would be due in at work at 8 a.m., we'd get to 11, and there'd still be no sign of Joe. Considering we had offered him a job and a place to sleep in our flat, he didn't seem all that grateful. In fact, he was pretty rude and borderline aggressive, and in many occasions I would remove that word borderline. I would realize I couldn't get through a lunch rush one man down. It was 11 o'clock, time was ticking. So I would be worried. I knew I had my lunch rush that I couldn't be a man down with, and this is because we were trying to build a successful lunch chain, not just some random cafe somewhere. So when you have your target market standing in a queue, wearing suits with a sign on their head that says, "I'm in a rush, serve me now, please, before I go to Pret a Manger forever." So I'd haul ass into a cab, down to my flat, where I'd find Joe sleeping, like that. And I would yell and shake him like 100 times before he'd even wake up. And finally he would, and he would shove me off of him. He'd storm past me with fists clenched, yelling something about how he's just woken up and why can't I leave him alone? So eventually I would sufficiently apologize to the man sleeping in my house, eating out of my fridge, living and working in my company, for being so rude as to wake him up 3 hours after his shift started. So we'd sail on up to the Social Bite shop together, wouldn't talk for a couple of hours, and knew that we were going to repeat this cycle the next day. Joe was a pain in my ass. I just wanted to run this company and help people, and he was making it so difficult every day. With stories like this, hundreds more, and yes, stories that are worse than this. I was exhausted. I wasn't sure if it was going to work, this tool that we had tried to create to change people's lives for the better. I felt beaten. I could not get any of these guys from homeless backgrounds to turn up to work consistently for more than 2 weeks at a time without getting into some kind of trouble or starting some kind of brawl on the shop's front doorstep. I wanted to quit, and I tried several times. But the hook is deep. I stayed, and eventually things seemed to start to get better with Joe. I found myself worrying about him less. He seemed less aggressive, and he slowly started to get into the routine of employment and turning up to work on time occasionally. So as a kind of well done, we decided to take him and buy him his first tuxedo to wear to the Scottish Business Awards. So this was him and his brother Pete again in a tuxedo. He's flipping the bird at you. Sorry about that one. It's difficult to find a picture of Joe not doing anything inappropriate. It's either vodka or that one, I'm afraid. So we were going to go to the Scottish Business Awards with Joe. He was going to represent Social Bite and the homeless community. And it felt like quite a special evening for me. He had been living in my house and evolving in front of my eyes for months. And to be honest, I felt quite a maternal instinct towards Joe now. I felt proud of him. So this was quite a big night. President Clinton was giving the keynote speech. And that's a picture of me with President Clinton discovering that I could make this face for the first time. So there's this homeless guy in a tuxedo having a 3-course dinner surrounded by Scotland's richest and most elite businessmen, being entertained by President Clinton on stage. It was awesome. Yeah. And so I started surrounding myself by and working with the homeless community when I was about 21. And in the last 3 years, I have learned how to successfully rehabilitate a homeless person into full-time employment. And it takes 3 things: patience, commitment, and additional support alongside their employment. We had realized you couldn't just give these guys a job and an income and expect them to not go and spend it on just alcohol and fags every week. They were not going to become productive, safe members of society. We had to provide counseling, so it was decided. Social Bite would now provide an hour's worth of counseling once a week to any formerly homeless person that came on board to work with us. It would be compulsory as part of their employment. If they wanted the hours, if they wanted the money, they had to turn up to this session. So, a few months ago, the awesome charity Serenians came on board, and now a kick-ass woman that the guys fondly refer to as Babs spends an hour with each one of them. And they're not always going to go into that session and talk about deep-rooted childhood issues. To be honest, they don't want to talk about it. But they understand that it is a trained professional who is going to check in with them once a week, and it's a safe space for them to talk about whatever might be on their mind. And it seems to be working. So now Social Bite wants to provide a more individual service and support system to these vulnerable members of staff. I myself am moving into a position in HR next week. I say a position in HR. I'll be HR. I'm HR. I'll be working with all of Social Bite's incredible members of staff, and they are incredible, all of them, not just the formerly homeless guys, to hopefully provide a more individual service that understands the struggles of each of these vulnerable members of society. And I hope that it works. So far, so good. So Joe is now working at our central production kitchen in Livingston. He's been working there consistently for the last year, which is by far his longest stretch of uninterrupted employment with Social Bite. He hasn't punched anyone or threatened anyone or stormed out of a shift. And now when he has a bad day, he takes 5 minutes to have a long fag break round the corner from Social Bite's kitchen. So, we're getting somewhere. And we're realizing that these homeless members of society can be fully functional, tax-paying members of society. And we know, because Joe is just one of 16 members of staff that we employ from homeless backgrounds. Moving forward, we hope to continue to provide an individual service to each of these guys to bring them into the equation. So my point is this. Any of you in here that own a company or want to start up a business, and in fact, TEDxGlasgow should leave here today thinking about employing just one of these guys. Change one person's life. Why not? Yeah, it'll be hard. They'll take more time and support from you than another person might have done. And you'll have to be willing to be kind, to be patient, to give them a lot more chances than you would anyone else, because they're going to need them. But we call ourselves a developed country, but we exclude these people. We walk past these people. We all do. We ignore them. What's developed about that? We've become conditioned to think that we understand them. So, I beg of you, employ and empower the homeless community, because it is possible, but we just have to work a little bit harder. And I'm sorry if that scares you, but it's necessary. I would like to leave you with a beautiful moment about Joe. So, this is Joe and me a couple of weeks ago outside the central kitchen, and I think he's looking well and happy. And looking at that photo now, I don't actually know where the aggressive, abusive guy went. I phoned him a couple of nights ago to make sure it was right that I told this story, and he was just lovely about it, and he was just so horrible a few years ago. So, Joe re-met his father a couple of years ago through the powers of Facebook. And when I asked him, why did you want to meet your father again? That horrible guy, why are you going to bother seeing him? He sees him, he keeps up with him. This man put you and your siblings in cupboards, emotionally and psychologically scarred you, and treated you like dirt, and set you up for life the wrong way, never gave you a chance. He did despicable things to him and his siblings. How could you see him? And Joe said to me, his father did the same thing to him. He doesn't know any different. Once you understand that sentence, really understand the gravity of that sentence on our society, you will not only have a pool of patience for people like Joe's dad, but you will live in awe of people like Joe who decide to break the chain. Why not employ one of them? Thank you.